Alan Quinlan is with us. It's 8:55 if you're watching us on OTB AM live this morning, or if you listen to the podcast a little bit later, you're very welcome. Now, Alan, I'm reading a lot of positive things about Munster. I'm unused to watching people praise Munster in defeat. So, are we right to be doing that, given the injury profile that they had? Or I do sometimes think, what would Roy Keane say in this situation?
It's the exact same thing I was thinking all weekend myself. What would he say? Yeah, I think they're right, given the circumstance and where they're at. I think they got a fair bit of flack in the first couple of weeks of the season, and very deservedly so. I think this the problem here is the previous coach and staff. I think what they've left behind, and that's slowly starting to trickle out regarding standards, fitness levels, culture. I wouldn't say a lack of effort, because there's a lot of decent, honest players have been there in the last number of years, and they've kind of got near that final hurdle a lot. But I think the overall picture is kind of coming home to roost now. So there's no point in kind of having a go at the current group.
But are you able to separate Graham Rowntree from all that?
Yeah, because I know that the problems have been going on for a number of years. I know that probably the alarming thing as well as this isn't a personal attack on Johan van Graan. He was offered a new contract last year. Where would we be? At least, I think this thing needed to stop. It needed to be dissected. And look, I said that a number of years ago. Again, I hate kind of repeating myself, but I end up repeating myself about that. Every regime, every organisation, every business should be continuously looked at. How we're getting on, how we improve, what we need to do, what's the culture like. Are the staff kind of dropping their standards a little bit? Do we need to have a night out? Do we need to train harder? Do we need to push more? All that kind of stuff. So that's common practice. But when your neighbours up the road are continuously talking about culture, the environment, the drive, the desire, the standards, and obviously producing the quality, which is, has been second to none for Leinster. They've all the players they have and the systems they have, and they've set a great standard. You hear teams across Europe talking about them, you hear the South African teams talking about them, and that's the reality. That's where they're at. I think a club like Munster should be better. It should be looked at more. It should have been looked at more, and maybe people took their eyes off the ball again. To be fair to the hierarchy in Munster, R.G. Snyman, Damien Dialende, Graham Rowntree, Stephen Larkham, there was excitement, before that World Cup when they were announced. This was kind of the turning point. But the game is moving on all the time, right across the board, regarding your skills on the ground, your fitness levels, your ability to catch pass, all those things that we maybe take for granted. But really good quality coaching continues. And you saw what Joe Schmidt did with Ireland. If you give players detail, and they demand detail, and they should demand that detail all the time. The top internationals want to be coached. They want to be challenged. And I think, obviously, I'm going off track a little bit here, but I think the reason there's no need to do, completely slate this group is because it's a reality. Looking back, a lot of the problems were allowed to fester and get worse.
Imagine if they'd kept the old regime. It's a good point that you raised that I'd kind of largely forgotten about. Like, they wanted to give him a new deal. He left us.
Yeah, and look, I was, and I'm not being the one who's being sharp after the event here and saying, oh yeah, because at the time I thought we were seeing certain kind of green shoots of the attack. The Clermont game stands out to me there in Europe, where they had a brilliant away win in Europe, and they threw caution to the wind a bit when they were way behind in the game, and they came back and won it. We haven't seen enough of that. The attack hasn't been good enough, the basic skills. And if you look back in the last number of years, we've seen so much box kicking, one-out runners, bland rugby that does not win you games when you get to quarterfinals, semi-finals, finals. You have to attack. So if you give a number of years training players not to attack. Like, being brave and seeing what's in front of them, playing what's in front of them. So there's a lot of that stuff that's gone on. There's a lot of players who haven't been good enough that have been playing, need to prove themselves. There's been a lot of 2 and 3 year contracts given to people that needs to be questioned and looked at. I've said this many times as well. When I got into my 30s, it was a lot of my last 3 years were 1 year contracts. What happens with Ger when you get a 1 year contract?
You play your eyes out.
Well, if you get a 2 year contract, you don't make this decision consciously that, well, it's grand now, I'm cosy. You feel that way. But sometimes you can drop a little bit and say, well, I'm not going in the extra 10 or 15 minutes or the half an hour earlier. You know, I'm okay here, and 6 months now, the contract's up. I got to start really kind of being conscious and aware. It can happen to anybody. So what we saw on Saturday night was minimum requirement when you put on a Munster jersey, in my opinion: heart, fight, passion. I saw, and I think anybody who's a rugby person saw, you know, the quality and the difference in the subs that were coming on. When you look at Porter, Conan coming on for Leinster, it's phenomenal. We know that. So that's the reality. The players who started, the injuries they have. Leinster have injuries as well, but they can cope. So,
but it's the other thing though. It's layering on top of that. Did you see a game plan and an attacking intent and a desire not to just play?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think Joey Carberry going off it kind of disrupted things a little bit, because I thought he was really good against the Bulls, and he was really good the other night under massive pressure.
Yeah,
at times he was getting the ball. It was a wall of Leinster players coming at him because, you know, they weren't. They were able to do that. I think, look, with respect to the two centres, they haven't played together. They haven't played at a higher level together. You're coming up against Henshaw and Ringrose. Ringrose is just picking gaps, siding through players. You know, Munster don't have Fekitoa, they don't have Chris Farrell, they don't have Anton Frisch. They're three really good players, and there's a lot of positive talk about Frisch and what he can bring. Chris Farrell, we don't know when we'll see him again. You know, so you're really down to the bare bones, and same in the back three players. So it's what separate players, and I know they had injuries as well. James Lowe and Hugo Keenan, and you know, Gibson Park, and there's probably a load of more that Josh van der Fleer wasn't there, Kelleher. You can name loads of Leinster players, but they have the depth. But Munster showed some glimpses the other night of what they're trying to do, and what was most pleasing for me is they didn't fold from the week before. And not just didn't fold, it wasn't this, keep the ball tight. They actually tried to play a bit. So I can say
the culture is changing.
Well, at 22-13, Ger, Munster are attacking and it's 73, 74 minutes. They're the ones that are kind of trying incredible defence. And Leinster, it's very hard to break them down. So they make a mistake, turn the ball over, they go up the field. Piece of brilliance from Ringrose with the offload out of the tackle, and they score to stretch it out to 27-13. Did Leinster butcher chances? Yes. Should they have scored more? Yes. But Munster kind of defended and made it really difficult at times for them. So there is positives to take out of it. Thomas Ahern, John Hodnett, I think Jack Crowley, we're starting to see the real Jack Crowley, what he's capable of. I love the fact that at times he'd Leinster people in front of him, even coming from full back, that he can step, he'd find a little bit of space. He's a brilliant ball player. And you can see that the Emerging Ireland stuff has done him the world of good. He's a big, strong, physical guy as well. So I think he's a real positive. But they are down to the bare bones, and they've got more injuries again.
We're waiting for news on Carberry. We don't know. Is there any?
No, I don't know. And I think they probably won't really know the full extent of it until Monday. He didn't look like he was going off holding his arm or was dislocated, or it looked like more of a bang or a knock. Or
fingers crossed it's a stinger.
Yeah, hopefully it's okay for him. But he wouldn't be available next week anyway, because all the internationals are gone. But it's more for the November internationals. But it was a strange atmosphere there on Saturday, because even meeting Leinster people, they were kind of half nervous about what would they give me a bit of slagging. Yeah, and look, that is sad, Nathan, that it's gone to that. But that is our reality, as I said. This is 10 games. Munster have won one of these now in the last 10. So in the league, the last time they won was 2018. So if we had this kind of slowing the game down, box kicking, stuff on Saturday night. That would have infuriated me and the Munster fans. But when you talk about those young players, Edogbo, Ruan Quinn is 19 years of age coming off the bench. That gives you hope.
Yeah, okay.
Plus, and I say this again, plus the game.
Yeah, so most important is that the culture is changing, and those young players all seem like they're capable of influencing it.
But they still have issues. They need to get people in the front row and more depth across the board.
Yeah, okay. Question from Mark Dunning very early on in the show this morning, so hopefully you're still watching. Hi all, what did you make of the positioning of Frawley for Leinster on Saturday? Do you think it's a hint that Farrell is thinking of matching the box 6-2 split on the bench with Frawley covering the back line?
Could well be. I don't know if it's not the policy of Ireland to do that, is it? But I thought Frawley played really well, and every time I see him, I think he's an intelligent footballer. He runs brilliant lines, and I think he's the one that maybe could slip in as if Carberry was out now, he could be in it as your replacement 10. Which wouldn't be a big surprise, but he's a really, really good player, really intelligent the way he runs, and he's that kicking option as well. I don't know if that'll happen. I don't think Andy Farrell will do that.
Is it worth experimenting with that just to see what happens? Like, we never do it. Maybe in a World Cup you might need to do it once. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it may be. And if you put it's kind of like sometimes I think about the decision of playing. Doing the 6-2 split is if you have this incredibly two dynamic back row players, you're picking your second row, obviously, right?
Yeah.
And then you have these two guys that you go, Jesus, I don't know which one of them to pick. They both, if you unleash the two of them straight onto the field at one time, they would make a difference.
Like Conan and O'Mahony, Conan and Van der Fleer.
Yeah. But yeah. Exactly. Even in Timony or something like that, just to come on and be really abrasive, And he's played really well for Ulster as well. So it may be something that they would look at doing.
You got to experiment now, right?
I don't think it's something you have to practice. So do you know what I mean? I think it's something you can.
Needs must, is it?
Yeah, but like obviously you would put.
Let's see what our bomb squad is like versus their bomb squad.
Yeah, well, their bomb squad is fairly big, isn't it?
So maybe you don't bring your bomb squad to the bomb squad.
A knife to a gunfight.
Ryan Baird as well as someone, back row. If Henderson started, if you brought in another second row, would you put Tyg Byrne there as well? So there's a couple of options there.
Baird could be your second row sub if Tyg Byrne is in the back row, and then you could still have three in the back row. I don't know. So you don't think 6-2 split's a thing for Ireland?
No, I don't think it would be a policy as regards, but I think it's certainly something that obviously wouldn't. It's something that maybe they could look at and do. Depends if they have a lot of players available, and it will come down to that kind of split decision that you're kind of thinking who will I leave out here, and then you go well.
Frawley being able to slot in at full back again underlines the difference for the individuals in the two teams, and the sort of systemic culture issues in Munster that, like Carberry still, it almost feels like a referendum every time he plays on his future and his positioning, whereas Frawley can just go into a game like that, slot in full back. He's got all these incredibly talented, gifted players around him and can perform to his best.
That's the advantage, isn't it? When you just said it, all these gifted, talented players around him. I've always said this when I played with Munster. If you're bringing in a young fella and you want to try and play him with 12 or 13 of the starters and then make him really feel, God, not overawed, but we're here to look after him and protect him and stuff like that. Sometimes when Carberry's at full back, it's kind of needs must. We saw that a couple of weeks ago. It's because you've no back three players, your forwards under pressure, you're not really sure where your strength is, where you're going to dominate in the game. Frawley can sit back there, and he had a pretty, I wouldn't say a difficult time on Saturday night. He had a lot of time. Even at one stage, the counter-attack from Leinster, I was like, oh, geez, they're going to go straight through Munster here, because Munster were out on their feet at one stage in the first half from defending. Then they're trying to get a kick chase line, and it's just all fractured, and it's really difficult to put any pressure on the back three. So, obviously, the internationals would be different, and you're going to be tested more, but I think he has that ability, and I think Andy Farrell, my cat, they believe he's someone can slot into a couple of different positions there and do really well for him.
The November internationals are going to be genuinely interesting to see what impact the injuries have on who they go for next. Like Mac Hansen was sensational for Connacht just recently, so you'd say he'll come back into the team given the injuries they have in the back three. But after that, is there room for experimentation? How much experimentation is there? Do they try the world-class centre partnership that Leinster had? I mean, when they play together like that, you're like, well, you can't really drop them. But at the same time...
Then, you have to take it... They'll be judged when they play for Ireland, do you know what I mean?
Against South Africa,
I think Stuart McCluskey is someone that has... I just think the last kind of 12 to 14 months he's been really, really consistently good. He looks fitter, he looks sharper.
And do you bring him for a World Cup where there's games?
Well, there's no Bundy Aki now for the first couple of games in November, so... if
to not feed into that problem that he's going to play Henshaw and Ringrose against South Africa and Australia, and then McCluskey will come in for the Fiji game, but he's going to be playing
really
with the other backup centre, and it won't be Johnny Sexton.
I'd be leaning that way but then the problem is the South African game is they're coming together as a group. I know a lot of the Leinster players play, but you're trying to organise different calls, different systems again, whereas I think maybe the Australia game is an opportunity to do something like that. But although against South Africa you're having that physicality and stuff, and it's not a worry.
Can we try Ringrose on the wing? Like, we've been talking about this, I'd say, for 4 years. Let's just try him on the wing. He could be...
He could play there, no problem.
But he could also be like an absolutely world-class winger, and then you can get another centre.
Aki, even Henshaw and Ringrose on the field all at once, which...
or
really,
Frawley.
Really work, yeah.
You can stick Frawley in at 12.
In as a 12 as well.
You suddenly... Then it's like really... Because there's been bits in games where he's popped up on the wing, and I don't know if it's Leinster just saying, okay, or if it's just kind of as the game flows. But, like, he's got game smarts that are off the charts. So, like...
It'd be brilliant to get to a position where if there was 4 or 5 changes in the Irish team, that you go... And that's the idea of it, isn't it? That you go...
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm not really bothered. That's a really good team on paper, and I'm comfortable with that. And that's probably the key now in this period, and probably through the Six Nations. I think Balakoon coming into the team could do that for you in the back three. McCluskey, hopefully, can do that. Craig Casey, if Gibson Park doesn't play, will he come in and start? And is he matured and developed after New Zealand as well? So... there's definitely that's what you want. You want to try and get those 4 or 5 players. If South Africa make 3 or 4 changes, maybe 2 in their backfield and 1 or 2 forwards, we kind of go, Jesus, that's still a very strong side, and these guys have played, because Nienaber rotates a fair bit, throughout the rugby championship and stuff.
Yeah.
So
I think that's
we probably need a little bit of that, possibly. I know there's a drive to win these internationals every time. I think the Six Nations, people often ask for change in Six Nations. We only see it in the Italian match. The other games are incredibly important.
Well, there are the money they make from the Six Nations prize money is, it turns out, very important to the RFU. And
what I suspect will happen here is the strongest team will be picked against South Africa. Then there'll be obviously a lot of changes, because there's the A game the day before, and the Irish management are coaching them as well. There's not a different set of coaches. So on the Friday night before South Africa, Andy Farrell, Paul O'Connell, Easterby, all the other coaches, John Fogarty, they're coaching this A team as well. So it's going to be kind of a busy week for them, getting them right. They play against New Zealand, and I think that's a great fixture, that A game. It's a great fixture the night before. It's having guys in camp, having the buzz of that game at the weekend against pretty strong New Zealand team.
They're in the same extended Ireland camp, and so it'll be a massive camp. Is that how that works?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
And that's largely going to be the same emerging Ireland, or is it a mix?
No, it'll be a mix. Obviously, guys off the bench. It'll probably be the first 24, 5, 6 players. Maybe there'll be 1 or 2 held back, and it'll be the rest will be playing in that A game. But you would think there'll be some guys there have a lot to gain by playing in that side, and
certainly longer term
the possibilities.
Okay, was there anything from Leinster's performance that you're thinking a little bit more efficiency there, lads? Obviously taking the Munster hat off, from Leinster's perspective, they cross the line in the first 44 seconds but don't get the try, and you're like, this is going to be one-way traffic here.
I think when they analyse the game, Ger, I think they will look at a couple of times they didn't put the ball through the hands and they could have scored, There was definitely 2 or 3 opportunities there, and look, that everybody can go back and look at that if they want. I think they'll be frustrated, and I think if they start pulling away a little bit there, it could get a little bit ugly. But the scramble defence and the effort from Munster, they kind of created that situation. It had a sense that even though Munster were stretched and they were getting line breaks at times, that Munster were going to get back and dismantle them. But when they look back at it, and their own, as regards their own standards, they need to be better if they want to, when it comes to the business end of it, because you're going to get that against the South African teams if they match you physically. So I thought that a lot of what they did, and maybe Leinster getting a bit of criticism here, a lot of what they did was really good.
And they still won.
Yeah, they still won comfortably in the end. But in that period, I think Leo Cullen even said it himself, when you're getting into the kind of 72nd, 3rd, 4th minute, and Munster are the ones attacking, and there's only 8 points in it. Is it 8 or 9 points? It's not ideal, because when you're supposed to win, you want to win well, don't you? That feel good. So they got the bonus point, but I think they need to be better as well.
Okay.